So, Dr. Vaccaro, obviously, I'm a patient of yours as well, but you've helped me through some addiction things in my past, and I've been in crypto space since 2016. And I don't know how much you know about cryptocurrency and the trading market, but many of my friends trade, uh, you know, and live a pretty high sensation life where we're losing hundreds of thousands of dollars, gaining hundreds of thousands of dollars, having a high net worth, losing our entire net worth over kind of 4 year cycles. And during that time, the mental health of many of the people that are my friends in the crypto space is kind of all over the place. For myself included. And so I think many of the people that are close friends of mine, we have a hard time, dealing with the dopamine highs and the lows and managing a healthy lifestyle in this type of space. Although we love it, we can't seem to leave the casino. We continue to, struggle these things from the day to day. So, like, from like a kind of baseline understanding, like, how do you define addiction, and how do you separate that from like a habit or something that's negative or positive?
Okay, well, one of the things that's great about this, Eric, is that it's really an important distinction about when does something cross over into addiction, when is it just a habit, when's it a lifestyle, and when is it an addiction. And the criterion for addiction across the line for either a substance use disorder or when you're talking about behaviors like process addictions, like gambling and food and other kinds of workaholism, the criteria is really about the negative aspects of it. It's when it kind of crosses over into the primary thing is the continuation of the behavior despite negative consequences. So, one of the main criteria for addiction is that you've tried to quit or you've tried to reduce, you've tried to modulate your behavior, moderation management. You've tried to
Mhm.
moderate it and you just can't. And there's a compulsive part of it. There's a feeling of compulsion that's part of it. So that's when it starts falling into the category of a compulsive behavior disorder or an addiction. The word addiction is really not in the DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual. It's really what we would consider kind of a colloquial term, addiction. It's really
Mhm.
about when something is compulsive behavior or impulsive behavior. So what we're talking about is when does a person feel like they've kind of lost control when they're driven to continue based on some other internal need and you're dealing with huge negative consequences. Now, something you and I have talked about offline a couple of times is that gambling is different than some other disorders in the sense that with a lot of substance use disorders and a lot of other addictions, you get this sense of mounting negative consequences and you start falling into this negative spin where no matter how much you do, it doesn't really bring you up to level again. But
Mhm.
gambling is a little different because the next win could be the big win. So it really messes with different parts of our rational cognitive behavioral brain because we keep thinking this one could be the one that could do it. And then you see evidence of that. And it's really publicized quite a lot. You see this evidence of big wins that people have that are life changing wins.
Mhm.
Now, you and I both know that there's a lot of data that indicates that even after a very big win, that people's behavior tends to modulate toward the mean. It's regression toward the mean. So you tend to not be at that high stage very long, either financially, emotionally, or physically. And you know this as an athlete, that without continual movement in that direction, you're going to regress. That's just the way the brain works.
And so how do people manage that? Like, and I think Ricky's on, Dom, but like some of my friends, they might make, you have a lot of feedback, Ricky.
Ah, hold on.
Can you mute?
Yeah, I'll be home in 3 minutes. I'll just hop on my computer.
All right, cool. Thanks. But how do people manage like getting these big six-figure wins and changing that behavior and knowing when to stop? It's like some of the if when a bear market turns for a crypto trader and they're not making the same yield that they're used to making on a trade, and they're not getting that same dopamine high, how do they how can they find some other solution to that?
I think one of the things that's important is to recognize how you as an individual manage or tolerate risk. So
Mhm.
risk tolerance is a big part of not just crypto investing, but any kind of investing. What is your kind of tolerance for risk? And what does risk do to you? Now, I remember a good friend of mine years ago took me to Vegas, and his aunt was a high roller, and we were at Caesar's Palace. And I sat down, and I was broke at the time, and she said, "Never played with scared money." And I just looked at her and laughed and said, I don't have any other, I don't have
Yeah.
any other kind of money. That's all I
Mhm.
got." And she said, "Well, get up from the table and go hit the buffet and go hit a show, because you're just going to make everybody crazy by the way you're playing." And it really stuck with me. First of all, the scared money stuck with me. It's like, yeah, that's how do you not have scared money? How do you not go into that and be willing to lose and be willing to ride that big ride? And there's one thing that I want to clarify about dopamine, because people use this term a lot and they talk about the neurotransmitter neuromodulator of dopamine. Dopamine is not the chemical of reward. Dopamine is the chemical of motivation. It keeps you moving towards something that is an expected reward or expected relief. So, either direction, whether it's going to give you some reward and good feeling, or it can move you towards the pursuit of something that's going to alleviate suffering. So, the relief paradigm. But dopamine in itself is just a motivator. It just moves you. If you have a lack of dopamine, you have a situation called Parkinson's, and we give you L-Dopa to help your body produce dopamine. So dopamine in itself is not a reward. That's why people with process addictions like sex addiction and gambling, they're running on this high of dopamine that is continuing to make them pursue and pursue and pursue, but they don't feel the satisfaction or any of the anxiety reduction. They just feel the pressure to move. So
So
dopamine moves you forward.
so let me understand that. So, like, the dopamine is what chases me towards that act,
It chases. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then when I get the act, it kinda resets, and then before you know it, I'm chasing again.
Yeah. So dopamine is a chasing chemical and is chasing
So
something that either gives you a reward or a relief. It's designed to keep you motivated towards action. And it could be, and dopamine primarily in the ancient world, dopamine was the motivation to go out and hunt, to hunt and gather. So,
mhm.
because the thing that you want has to have survival salience, it has to be something that your brain determines this is really good for my survival. Now, gambling is really powerful in that sense, because when you think about what am I going to do with this big windfall win, I can transform my life. When you're in this winning phase, there's the winning stage and the losing stage, then
Mhm.
there's the desperation stage, and then there's the complete hopelessness stage. I don't see people when they're in the winning stage. I'm sorry.
Mhm.
They come to
Mhm.
me when they're in the hopelessness stage, where
Mhm.
they're like, I just can't stop doing this gaming activity, but I'm not really getting anything out of it. And I'm really now making a lot of fear-based choices. So that's when you talk about risk reduction and fear-based choices, it goes back to what my aunt told me years ago. It's like, don't play with scared money, because when you play with scared money, you're always going to make fear-based choices. And a fear-based choice has that double bind to it. It's like, I really want, it's like, I really want to put this money down. If you can't afford to lose it, don't play it.
With respect to, like, gambling or sex addiction or drugs, though, like, does my dopamine levels increase as I increase that activity? So if I'm doing cocaine on a daily basis, or I need to gamble on a daily basis, or I need to have sex on a daily basis, is my dopamine rush significantly higher if I'm trying to have sex every day, or if I'm trying to have sex every 2 months?
Well, okay. So one of the main criteria for all addictions is the idea of tolerance. So what
Mhm,
happens, because our brain doesn't like to be at a level 10 of any level of neurotransmitter, doesn't like to be at that level. It's not designed to peak out. It's like on an equalizer on an audio machine, an audio equalizer. You don't want to be in the red zones all the time. It's too much distortion and it can burn you out. So what happens is that your brain starts peeling back the dopamine D2 receptors in your brain. It starts peeling those back, so it takes more dopamine for you to achieve the same level of high.
Mhm.
So what happens when you're really doing a lot of compulsive activities every single day, you're running up against this system that is designed to modulate how much arousal you can have, because our brain is not designed to be peaked out in any activities, anxiety state, arousal state, for very long. If you're peaked out for too long, it creates psychosis. So if your brain is running at those peak levels a long time and it's not peeling them back, and you're throwing more dopamine in there, you're gonna end up with psychosis. You're gonna end up with hallucinations. You're gonna end up with a lot of distortion in your brain. Your
Mhm.
brain is designed to process information at a particular rate, and we can improve that rate as we learn and develop, but it's still designed to process within a particular range. Doesn't like to be way up here, and it doesn't like to be too unmotivated either. It likes to be the Yerkes Dodson curve. It's a performance curve that most athletes know about, where there's a particular level of arousal and activation, body activation and arousal, that's necessary to complete a particular task. And it's different for different tasks. So when you're fighting, you got to be a little jacked up. You got to be activated. You can't go in
Yeah.
lethargic and not focused and not. You need mental acuity. You need your body to be working. You need to be in that fight or flight mode. You need to be activated. If you're too activated, though, you're going to get angry. The guy's going to piss you off, and you're going to make stupid moves. When I was a wrestler, that was the thing. I was small, but I was heavy, so I was wrestling against guys who were much bigger than me. So my job was to piss them off,
Mhm.
because when I pissed them off, they'd make stupid moves.
Right.
I'm smarter than them. So you want to stay within that range. It's a bell curve. You want to stay within the middle of the bell curve in arousal. You get too far in any direction, your performance is gonna drop off considerably.
And how do you try to check yourself as an individual that's trying to watch out for these things? You know?
I think the first thing, when you're thinking about what's motivating you to move forward, I think it's really good to understand what is your particular mindset. Now, there's a lot of talk about mindset management, and you and I have talked a lot about mental mastery, about really having an idea about what's going on inside of my head. What is motivating my behavior right now? And it's always a variety of things. It's never just one thing. Like when you're investing in crypto, it's not just, oh, I want to get a new house and a new business and improve the lifestyle for my family. It could be also, I want to do this quickly. I want the least amount of effort and the big amount of return. So our brain is designed for conservation of effort. It's an inherent part of the primitive brain. We want to get the big win, and it messes with us in these kind of situations, because in the primitive world, these kind of windfalls don't really happen. When you can find it's like, I laugh because I'm a food addict, so I laugh about something like a box store like Costco. My brain just loves Costco because it's very little effort to get a lot of reward.
Yeah.
And so the same thing happens with gambling. It's like you have the potential for this highly rewarding thing that has a lot of valence. So valence is the value of something. It has a lot of valence for you. And your expectation of success is pretty good. Better, it's better in investing than it is in actual gambling,
Mhm.
because you don't have the sense that investing is designed against you. Although lots of gamblers know, they walk in, prefer the
They
house.
know.
They
Yeah.
know it walking in, but they still think I could be the one to beat it. There's still that sort of piece. So the first thing is to monitor what your mindset is. Do I have a mindset that I can get huge rewards for a little bit of effort? Or like you, as an athlete, you understand if you're going to fight, you know what it takes to get yourself into a fighting mode. You know what it takes to get yourself into peak
Yep.
performance, and you know what messes you up. And you and I have talked about this. It's not always the physical stuff that messes you up.
Mhm.
It's usually the mindset stuff that messes you up. It's like when something's messing with your head, and
And
you
I think that
get out of that mental loop.
Yep. I think that's a big issue for the crypto guys is like they get these big rewards with little effort a lot. And I was able to kind of manage me making a lot of money in crypto and not losing it because I worked 12 hours a day and running a law firm and did all this other things that I knew the value of money. But I don't know if you can help some of these young kids out here, but they don't know the value of money. They make all this money so fast and then they lose it just as fast.
Yeah.
And I think because they're either have this compulsion and addiction to trading and they've lost kind of the reasoning between why they're making a trade or doing some effort and they don't understand the value of money. So I don't know. You know, most of these guys are super high risk people. They have a super low risk tolerance. And I'm assuming we have, you know, similar psychological or emotional, like kind of red flags that, you know, make us this way.
Yeah, there's a theory in the 90s. It was called Valence expectancy theory, VIE theory,
Mhm.
and it's basically about the expectancy and motivation. Because we've looked at motivation a lot is in the field of social psychology to find out what motivates people to do stuff and how do you increase motivation, and also what are the social factors that are stimulating motivation.
Mhm.
So one thing to remember about when something tips into addiction is that the fail can be as most fun as the win. And that sucks. That's the
Yeah.
sucky part of addiction, is that failing in addiction has a huge hit of a lot of chemicals in your brain. And so sometimes what people are looking for is just that huge hit in
Tom,
the direction. Whether it's a huge hit of excitement and joy, or whether it's a huge hit of anxiety and frustration, sometimes that's the driver that keeps people moving, because that's a big, especially if you have a pretty flat life.
mhm.
One of the things that when I work with gamers, because I'm not opposed to gaming, I think it's incredible and can be really incredible for a neurodivergent person to have a gaming lifestyle. It can be amazing for them. The
And
problem,
crypto's a lot of gaming too. Like it's a PvP game,
yeah,
simply.
yeah. Yeah, and you know the gaming. There's a scale called the GAS scale, game addict. You don't need to know this, but it's interesting. The psychologists kind of have a variety of different ways of thinking about it. But in the gaming scale, there's an idea of salience. You know, what is a salient feature? Salience is basically, you know, how much your brain is captured by something, and it
Mhm.
also links it to survival. So when something becomes linked to survival salience in our brain thinks, oh, this thing is necessary for survival, or especially necessary for my survival in this circumstance. So even though ultimately, because you had two different careers, three different careers, your investment isn't necessarily going to cripple your survival. If I don't make it, I still have my law practice. I still have other pillars of income. So for you, you can tolerate the risk better and actually tolerate the loss better, because
Yeah.
you got survival salience spread out over a couple of areas.
Yeah.
But a person who doesn't have that, a person who doesn't have their survival salience, their brain locks in and says, oh, this thing is really necessary for survival. Now, the insidious part of addiction is that all addiction takes place like that. Our brain, because of the dopamine effect and other neurotransmitters connected to addictive substances, our brain starts preferencing that thing and saying, this is necessary for survival. So when you have something that has monetary value, has valence that's monetary, our brain automatically links it to survival. The more money I have, the easier it is for me to acquire survival resources, and
Mhm.
the easier it is for me to be happy. So it's kind of an automatic link. That's why it becomes so quickly addictive, is because, oh, the more money I have, the more lifestyle I'll have, the better my lifestyle, the more I can acquire, and I can tolerate down periods.
I mean, speaking of one of those people, Ricky's on the show. He's Ponzi trader, but he's in his, you know, I think late 20s now. Finally, Ricky, or what?
Yeah. Hey, Doc, I'll give you
Hey, how are you?
a little introduction to myself. I'm probably a perfect case study for someone like you.
I'm in my late 20s. I am a derivatives trader, and I can openly say that I've developed an addiction to trading, which is probably the downfall to my trading. I find myself there, for trading specifically, there's only a handful of times when traders have an edge and can comfortably say that they should be trading. And my downfall, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm fairly successful in what I do. I've made millions and millions of dollars in trading, but my downfall being that I trade when I shouldn't.
Mhm.
I'm fairly addicted to trading. I haven't found myself in many years able to not take on a position, which is my downfall because I end up trading when I shouldn't and giving back profits that I've made. I definitely live a lifestyle that complements high cortisol, high adrenaline in the sports I do. I'm a race car driver. I like video games. I do all the whole nine. So it doesn't help with that aspect of things. But I'm really interested in, I'm sad I missed the first 15 minutes of this call in hearing, your opinion on this lifestyle.
So great. I'll ask you I just was talking with Eric about this idea that we tend to think of addictive behavior as being the big hit. Well, first of all, I mentioned about dopamine. I'm glad you mentioned cortisol and adrenaline, other chemicals that are involved, oxytocin. There's a lot of other chemicals that are involved. Endogenous opiates, those are the ones that when you actually achieve the reward that you feel good about. So dopamine is just driver. It's just the driver that keeps you driving. Now, what I mentioned to Eric is that sometimes with process addictions, you get a big hit of energy when you succeed, and you also get a big hit of energy when you fail. So sometimes failing can be as powerful of a motivator as succeeding, because if your life is very flat, I was mentioning that sometimes I work with neurodivergent people who are not really good at kind of being out in the world, and their life tends to be very sort of flat. And the more involved with your addiction you are, any addiction, your life becomes kind of funneled down. It kind of becomes funneled down to all of my thoughts, all of my attention, all of my focus is on this particular addiction behavior. So it happens with drugs or alcohol, happens with boxing, it can happen with whatever funnels your attention down.
Yeah, there seems to be a pattern of that. Like when there's a bear market or the market's going sideways for some period of time too. Like a lot of our friends on our group chat or whatever else will have this like liquidation event where they'll almost go broke. It's like maybe status quo is a very strange thing,
Sorry, Eric, go ahead.
Go ahead, Ricky. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, and to contribute to that thought, as a trader, you really remember the days you took really significant losses, and rarely do you remember the days that you took incredible wins. It's easier for me to look back and say, this was one of the worst days of my life. I took my biggest loss, and it's a little more difficult for me to rehash on days where I've had some of my most significant wins. And I'm going to share my screen if you can.
Dom, you want to share a screen?
There's a book I read called Market Wizards where he interviews some of the most successful traders of all time. And in this paragraph, he's speaking to someone named Ed Seykota, who is a very successful multi-billion-dollar trader. And the interviewer says, "Do all traders want to win?" And this page really reflects on 90% of traders, in my opinion. I'll read it out loud. He says, "Win or lose, everybody gets what they want out of the market. Some people seem to like to lose, so they win by losing money. I know one trader who seems to get in near the start of every substantial bull move and works his $10,000 up to $250,000 in a couple of months. Then he changes his personality, loses it all back again. This process repeats like clockwork. Once I traded with him, but got out when his personality changed. I doubled my money when he wiped out as usual. I told him what I was doing and even paid him a management fee. He couldn't help himself. I don't think he can do it any differently. He wouldn't want to. He gets a lot of excitement. He gets to be a martyr. He gets sympathy from his friends, and he gets to be the center of attention. Also, possibly, he may be more comfortable relating to people if he is on their financial plane. On some level, I think he is really getting what he wants. I think that if people look deeply enough into their trading patterns, they find that on balance, including all their goals, They're really getting what they want, even though they may not understand it or want to admit it. A doctor friend of mine tells a story about a cancer patient who used her condition to demand attention and, in general, to dominate others around her as an experiment prearranged with her family. The doctor told her a shot was available, which would cure her. She constantly found excuses to avoid appearing for the shot and eventually avoided it entirely. Perhaps her political position was more important than her life. People's trading performance probably reflects their priorities more than they would like to admit. I think that some of the most flamboyant, interesting traders are playing for more than profits alone. They're also playing for excitement. One of the best ways to increase profits is to do goal setting and visualizations in order to align the conscious and subconscious with making profits. I have worked with a number of traders in order to examine their priorities and align their goals, blah, blah, blah. But this is such a real paragraph because this is 90% of the trading community who ends up making money and giving it all back. It's the emotions and attachments to winning and losing that probably have a massive play.
Yeah, Ricky, that's fantastic. That is really fantastic. That's a great reference point. One of the things that we were talking about earlier that's really important with this is that the brain has a negativity bias. Our brains are wired through evolution. The primitive brain is wired to pay more attention to negative stimuli than positive stimuli. Why? Because negative stimuli can be threatening and can injure you. So our brain is hardwired to pay a lot more attention to when things go bad to when they go right. And the reason for that is supposed to be that when we fail, we're supposed to be able to look out for those kind of dangerous cues in the environment and achieve over them the next time. So have some awareness and expectancy of how to achieve in spite of those the next time. So there's a great story about Michael Phelps when he was swimming and his goggles filled up with water, and he still was able to swim, gold medal time. And when they asked him, he said, "Well, I practiced that. I practiced every contingency. I was so good at swimming that I didn't just practice with the ideal match in sight. I practiced what happens when things go wrong." And our brain is hardwired to pay a lot of attention to failure. And it's hardwired to motivate us when we fail, because I was talking with Eric earlier about this. The first correlation to this kind of behavior is hunting behavior in the primitive brain. And if we don't hunt every day, and in the primitive world, if you didn't hunt, you didn't eat, hunter-gatherer. So the hunter-gatherer brain is always out there looking and searching and trying to find survival resources. And every day it's motivating you to do that. And it motivates you twice as much when you didn't win the day before. So each day that you are not successful in hunting, your brain is jacking up the discomfort and the motivation and the resources. And it's actually making you hyper alert. And that's one of the things that people, when I work with gamblers, they talk about the state of hyper alertness when they're really losing. And they got to pay attention to everything. And they need to make sure all the indicators, and there's hyper alertness, hyper vigilance that happens. It's a euphoric state. It's actually a manic state. It's actually very similar. And a lot of traders are bipolar. You know this. There's like the manic depressive kind of flip that happens. And they use the mania as a motivator to move them forward, because mania is a high dopamine state. So some of it is their internal workings of their brain. But the other thing is that just losing itself forces you to continue to try harder and strive harder, and you get a lot out of it. Now, also in the passage you read, there is a secondary gain that comes from losing. There is a secondary gain that comes from being sick. So the idea of primary gain and secondary gain, it's a psychological concept. You don't need to know it, but what's interesting about it is that primary gain is when you keep something out of conscious awareness. But secondary gain is when you get something from being in a particular state. So if you are sick and everybody around you is being controlled by you being sick, you get a lot of secondary gain out of it. It's very powerful. So sometimes people don't want to get better because it is the way that they're controlling the system. We see this a lot with substance use disorders. We see this a lot with other kinds of mental disorders, like, why aren't you taking your depression medication? Well, because when I'm depressed, everybody comes around and And when I'm fine, everybody's on with their own life. So I love the passage you read because it really speaks to the sort of darker side of winning is people get a huge hit out of losing.
Yeah, a lot of the traders that I run an educational group as well, and I've learned that some of the guys in this group are incredible traders, and the thing that they fall victim to is their own psychology.
Mhm.
And one of the biggest things that occurs with traders is that death spiral. Once you take one loss, you start chasing that loss and trying to fight back, and that's when you throw everything you've learned about trading out the window. I think I did that for 4 years before I was a profitable trader. Now it's been 9 years, so thankfully I've been able to kick that a bit, and I've created risk limits. And my structure of trading is not traditional in the sense of how I take profits and withdraw and restructure my trading accounts to prevent that kind of spiraling from occurring. But if people can't master their own psychology, they'll never be a good trader.
Yeah. What's interesting, Ricky, for you, what are the series of indicators when you're in that risk spiral? What are the series of indicators that make you stop? Because that whole cascade that happens where you just keep throwing good money after bad,
Yeah.
and you get caught in this could be the one, or it's a kind of desperation. It's a survival panic. It actually is kind of a survival panic. It's what made ancient hunters hunt outside of their hunting area. Because if you ever watch any of those survival shows, which I love, there's a particular radius that you can hunt in. If you live up north in sub-zero weather, there's a particular radius you can hunt in. Beyond that radius, your risk reward is really marginal. It really reduces your level of reward for the level of risk because you can't drag this animal back. So it's the same thing that happens for you. It's like you're at this threshold where, okay, my risk and my reward are kind of equal right now. The further I go with this, it's now a descending spiral. It's going to take a huge win for me to offset this huge loss.
100%.
What are the indicators for you? Because you've mastered this. So what are the indicators for you about when to pull out?
So unironically enough, I still can't control it if I find myself in that position. So I've actually taken preventative measures. The first thing is I never trade. My active trading account is never more than 10 to 15% of my entire portfolio now.
Okay.
So that if I enter that spiral, my buffer is a 10 to 15% hit on my entire portfolio.
Yeah.
The second one is I now trade whenever I have a really successful day and I'm peak euphoria, where today was probably an incredible example of this. The market is doing incredible and I anticipated this and I positioned myself accordingly. The first thing I'll do when I'm in this state of peak euphoria, like right now where I'm like, holy shit, I'm a winner, I'll never lose, is withdraw. So I immediately withdraw the profits from a day like today and I store them back to my main portfolio so that if I start to over leverage or over position or take more risk than I need to, I've now taken away the majority of those profits and I'm really only playing with house money in theory. And then if I blow up this account or I find myself in a spiral, I've positioned myself so that I'm really only playing with the money that I've won over the X amount of days. And I will not allow myself to deposit. I have a 3-step process. I send it to cold storage where I actually have to go somewhere to grab that device, to then plug it into my computer, to type in a password, to then send it to an exchange. And that process has stopped me from doing that. If it's somewhere like on my phone and I can just resend it back to the exchange, then I'm in trouble. It's too easy.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's exactly it. We used to refer to this as hardening the target, which is kind of a law enforcement term. But it's like we need to make it, the way to manage impulsivity is to create more steps that you have to go through because all of those cognitive steps decrease impulsivity.
Yeah.
And if I have to go through one, but the other thing you do that's great is surplus management. And that is, obviously that's a law of economy. What do you do if you don't manage surplus and you keep playing with surplus? You don't have surplus. So surplus management is kind of what you were talking about earlier, Eric, too, is your kind of surplus management is you have different pillars of resources. You have different pillars of income. So you're never betting with the whole house. And I love this idea you're playing with house. But those two things are amazing. hardening the target is the one thing that we talk about across the board with all addictions. So any process addiction, even substance use disorders, we talk about this idea of the more steps you have to go through to achieve this, the less likely you are to follow those steps. And you can interrupt that behavioral chain by diverting it into another chain. So it's the idea of behaviors are designed to be automatic. So our brain is designed to create habits and to make those habits automatic as soon as possible, especially when you're dealing with something that's very complicated like trading. You don't want to have to go through all of these criterion all the time. A lot of times you're making gut impulses because you've already established an internal system that you're following. So if you had to go through and you had to like a little checklist that said, oh, I do this first, this first, this, it just takes too long to do that. So what we do to reverse the impulsivity of gambling is harden the target, make it more difficult, have more steps. And also with like drug abuse, we try to create barriers to, you have drug testing, you have other people, you have sober coaches, you have other things that are in the way that prevent you from being impulsive. It doesn't necessarily work on the compulsive aspect of it, so we still have to work on all of the compulsive thoughts, but we're trying to reduce impulsivity. So we're trying to change our brain in two directions. We want to change the impulsivity factor so you're not just immediately being able to take action on something. And we're trying to change the obsessive compulsive activity of the brain, which is the ruminating and the thinking about it. And as you've described, we think about, because of the negative bias, we ruminate on losses far longer than we do on wins. Like you'll talk to people and they will tell you their lost stories, just like in addiction rooms, everybody comes in and tells their horrific addiction stories, and you remember them. It's because your brain is designed to encode, it's called single trial learning. Our brain is designed when something big like that happens to pay a bunch of attention to it and to encode it into memory. The big losses really have a huge impact. And for some people, that's a turn on. Some people that can be really stimulating if their life is really flat. Mm-hmm. We have found too that sometimes with gamblers, very, very successful people, they start having this downward trend. And we're looking at it, it's like, what's going on in other areas of your life that your business or your investors, what's going on in other areas of your life that all of it's starting to be on this downward trend? And inevitably, it's not, the first indicator is not what's happening in their trading. The first indicator is what's happening in their personal life. If their personal life has flattened out and they become more isolated and they don't have a lot of highs and lows, then what ends up happening is they end up trying to find that need in the market.
So what's some advice for like a trader or like I'm in the crypto space that is going through these flat periods? Because when I'm making a lot of money or trading and it's become flat at some point, then as you know, doctor, I'll seek other things to keep me occupied, whether it be drugs or alcohol or partying or whatever else. What advice would you give to the kids out there trying to prevent them from going down that spiral?
Well, the thing you and I have talked about, Eric, is that you do need to actually expand it out with other things. It's just the things you're talking about are kind of like for like, like what we talked about is you don't want to exchange one negative habit pattern for another negative habit pattern. Mm-hmm. So, but because of the way that dopamine is set up in our brain, when you're really activated and you're really agitated and your life feels really flat, then you're going to try to find some other big hit, some other big win. So it's in two directions. We have to find other things that we can sort of cobble together, that we can put together that meet a little bit of our dopamine needs, that get us up to like a level 5 or 6. And we have to get comfortable with not being in the 9s or 10s. And you and I have talked about this. When your life is filled with these big 10 wins or these big 10 losses, and the brain doesn't differentiate, a big stimulus in a positive direction and a big stimulus in a negative direction, the brain pays a lot of attention to both. So we have to get used to living more within the mean, more within the middle. So exercise, other things that increase your life. It's not that the risk taking is bad. You guys have the risk taking gene. There's a particular set of genes that are connected with risk taking that are amazing for survival. But the problem is that it gets to be where you're hooked on a particular level. You're hooked on this level 9 experience, level 10 experience. I think they used to call it the maximum mindset, where you're looking for perfection and the maximization mindset. That's the first thing that traders have to really reduce, is they have to be able to find, I need to spread out my satisfaction in a lot of areas of my life. I can't have a flat life where I don't talk to anybody. I'm sitting alone in my room and I'm just gaming all day long. Gamers tend to become gamblers. Why? Because they have the medium, and there's not a lot of hardening of the target. It's very easy for them to do it sitting there. So the first thing we say is, you got to have a lot of other stuff in your life that are survival resources. People, friends, activities. I mean, what you've got, Eric, is great. You've got this whole athletics area of your life that requires a lot of attention and focus, that requires, it's also an adversity, mimetic, the idea of longevity and adversity. Our body needs stress and tension in order for us to survive. So if we don't have stress and tension, we actually atrophy. So you need something that provides all of that. So sports. So I think you said, Ricky, that you drive race cars? Are you a race car driver?
Yeah, I honestly, I've developed a lot of hobbies that I do. Like today I was surfing all day. I put on positions and I didn't want to overtrade, so I went out and surfed.
Yeah.
I drive race cars.
Yeah.
A pick Miata.
Yeah, I do a lot of exercise. I fly airplanes. I have a plane. So whenever I find myself in a position of tilt, the first thing I do is either go to my sauna or my gym, or go to fly, or get in my race sim, or get in the car. Because if I don't, then I'll start to channel that tilt into trading, which can be very devastating.
Yeah, great. So excellent. That's exactly where I would go. Is basically you have these other resources, and they're scaled resources. So perfect. What you said was perfect. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go hit the sauna. That's an adversity mimetic. It stimulates my body. It feels like pressure. It feels like stress. It's positive stress for it's eustress for my body. There's eustress and distress. So it's positive stressing on my body. It puts me into a little state of positive stress, which shifts my mindset. And also then I start putting other stuff in front of it. When you're hardening the target, you're putting other stuff in front of gambling, or putting other stuff in front of trading. It's like, okay, what else can I do that's going to bleed off some of this dopamine? In somatic experiencing, we call it discharging. You've got a high mood and a high body state, and you need to discharge that in some way, in some direction. If not, it just builds up. This happens a lot with sex addiction and porn addiction. This sort of edging phenomena where you're just building and building and building and building and building. And the dopamine is just continuing to chase that. If you don't do something to actually bleed that off and direct that in some area, you can be doing that forever until you actually get fatigued. So perfect. You have all these other areas, and when you start to feel a particular sensation, when you're in that space of, I got to do something else. There's a thing called interoception. It's this idea of being able, and you do this as an athlete, Eric, where you have to be able to understand what's going on inside of me physically. It's a little internal scan of what's going on in my body right now. Am I hungry? Am I angry? Am I tired? In addiction, they refer to the acronym HALT: hungry, angry, lonely, tired. But what's going on? The first question is, okay, what's happening with me? Am I in an optimal state of performance? And what's difficult for stuff that's online is that even though it is performance driven, we don't think of it as such. Like, you don't think about, do I have to be in the same optimal state of performance for going and trading online as I do when I'm going into a ring? So if you think about it, Eric, it's like, when you're going into a ring, there's an immediate feedback loop. If I'm not really if I'm not really in the right mindset, there's going to be a problem here. And the feedback's going to be right away, going to be immediate. But trading is sort of the same thing. If you're in the wrong mindset when you sit down, and you're stay in the wrong mindset for a period of time, something's going to happen. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to start chasing something that's not worth chasing.
Yeah. I mean, I do a lot of the stuff that Ricky's doing. I do the cold dip and the sauna and the training. It's really helped me prevent some of my addiction stuff. I moved back to the suburbs. So it's instead of being downtown LA where I just step outside and go out that night or make some mistakes, I'm in the suburbs and changing up those things. And that's all helped a lot. But it's tough, I think, for most of the guys in this crypto space to turn their brains off. We kind of develop this kind of ADHD because we're literally on Twitter. It's called X now, but we're on Twitter scrolling like all fucking day, checking prices. It's almost like I've developed ADHD from this.
Well, yeah, it's a mental obsession. Yeah, and it's designed to be that way. It's designed because you're chasing a survival resource. So the part of your brain that says, no, this is important for survival. I'm tracking where the prey is. I'm tracking where the survival resources are. And there's also this understanding of scarce resources. Like it could be there today and gone tomorrow.
Right.
It's a big mess up for our brain, and the idea that the scarcity part of resource management is that things are more valuable. They go up in valence in our brain the more scarce they are. Markets. This is market economy. So more scarce something is, the more we tend to value it. The reason for that is it's primitive. It comes from our primitive brain that says that, in the primitive world, honey or fruit were very scarce. So when you got that, you paid a lot of attention to it, you coveted it, you acquired it, you hoarded it, you hid it, and you used it as currency. It became real currency for you. So our brain hasn't really evolved all that much.
Can you define valence for me? Sorry, my computer crashed and now my speakers aren't working, so I've got my headset on.
Valence is basically the idea of what the value is that something has for you. So in the valence, instrumentality expectancy theory, it was the particular value that something has for you. And it doesn't have to be a monetary value. It can be an emotional value. It's usually a combination of things. So like a race car for you would have real valence, more for you than for me. I don't race cars, not a good driver, shouldn't be racing cars. So for me, that doesn't have the same valence. The valence of that, somebody said, I can give you a race car, it would be like a 2. It'd be like, yeah, I don't even know what I would do with it. I have to go find Ricky and give it to him. For you, it'd be like, cool, that's a 5, and then I can trade it for a 7 on a better race car. So valence is very personal. It has to do with how useful something is to you, whether it's something I can trade, whether I can use as currency. But our brain locks into it. And then there's a thing called survival salience, which is our brain thinks that this thing is necessary for survival. Most addictive behavior, most substance use disorders end up triggering the part of the brain it's the midbrain that says this drug is necessary for my survival because it gives me such a big dopamine hit and such a big analgesic effect with endogenous opiates. So therefore, I'm going to preference this over everything else, and I'm going to basically do it till I die. So those are 2 really important pieces of it. And then the other thing with gaming is this idea of the mood modulation we've been talking about, how it shifts your mood. And when you live a really flat life, anything that shifts your mood is better than nothing. So a person who leads a flat, isolated life, failing is better than nothing, better than flat.
So is it a pipe dream for me to say that someday I'll be able to leave the casino? Because that's like every day we log onto this app all day, every day. It's like a part of our lives. And it's like, all of us crypto people say, hey, if I hit this number, I'll disappear. I'll log off. But I feel like that's never going to happen. We have plenty of,
it's not designed to let you do that.
Yeah. We have plenty of OGs that have more money than they could ever do with, and they still haven't logged off.
Yeah. It's like any other obsessive compulsive behavior. You have to start replacing things.
Mhm.
The thing that's interesting though, when you talk to people who have, well, you guys have made a lot of money in this industry. So when you're talking, it's like, you can buy whatever you want to buy, but it still doesn't keep you from chasing. A good lifestyle doesn't keep you from chasing it. So what are we chasing? Are we chasing a better lifestyle? No, because our brain is designed to hunt every day. Even if I got meat in the freezer, my brain is still designed to hunt every day because the brain has a natural scarcity index that is primitive, that is not part of the modern world. We are not used to having abundance. Our brains are not designed that way.
Mhm.
However long you think human beings have been around, whether you go back 500 years, 2,000 years, 7,000 years, or 2 million years, you only have to go back 200 years to a level of scarcity that is so magnified differently than it is today. So if you think about our grandparents and our great-grandparents, the kind of scarcity that they lived in, it's very different than what we live in today. So there's always kind of a little bit of a safety net. Even people that that have been billionaires and millionaires and lost a ton of money,
Mhm.
are they living on the street? You know, there's a certain part of your brain that says, I could lose all this money and I'll still be okay.
Yeah.
Or I can make it back. The difficulty with this conservation of effort process in our brain is that it didn't take much effort for me to get it, so it won't take much effort for me to get it back. I got it in a windfall, I'll get it back in a windfall.
Is that what you thought, Ricky? You gone broke a few times.
Yeah, I actually wanted to ask you a question. So I think it ties into this, and another one of my flaws, I may say, which I'm really being open about these things on live, which is funny. But I tend to have a spending problem, and in the sense where it's not sustainable on a long time frame. And I've tried to self-diagnose it in the sense that the money has come at a rapid rate, in a very aggressive rate. And the only thing that I can think of as to why I have the urge to buy tangible items, and it's not that I spend it on things that are stupid, but things that hold value and are still, in theory, liquid plus or minus 5%, but
Mhm.
harder to sell. And the only self diagnosis I've come up with is that I have some sort of underlying subconscious that tells me I don't deserve the money at which the rate it came. And so by spending it in on these assets or items, I'm locking it away so that I can't lose it or something like that. I don't know. I've tried to self-diagnose that in a way.
Yeah. Based on what I don't know you very well, just what you've told me, but based on what you've described, it actually is more of a valence and surplus management strategy. That because money numbers on the screen don't have much meaning, that you're the kind of person, which is a really good thing, by the way. You're the kind of person that needs to convert it into something that actually is more real and tangible, because then that has more real valence for you. So it's one thing to say, oh, I lost, these numbers on my screen, or oh, I had to sell this car that I love, or I'm going to have to sell my house, or I have to sell my new watch
Yeah,
because
the watches is the number one thing. I have no problem spending $250,000 on a watch, and a lot of people see that as silly. But the watches that I'm strategically picking are things that hold value, maybe lose 2% or increase in value. And people see that as spending, but I see that as parking and a place where I can't just go and liquidate it on a table or in
yeah,
an
yeah,
exchange.
yeah, yeah. I want to get
So
on
I,
your Christmas list, by the way, just in case
If you if you haven't figured it out yet, Ricky's the coolest kid we know.
but what you're doing is actually I don't see that it's a deservability thing. I see what it is. It's actually you have a very good brain that says I need to make this tangible, and I need to make it tangible so that I'm not capricious with it. If it's something tangible, and first of all, one of the things that's important about rewards is that our brain doesn't like an intangible reward. It kind of likes the concept of it, but it really likes to feel we're very visceral, which is why an online sex act is not really as much fun as a sex act in person. An online date, not as much fun as in date. The thing we like about the online is we have a lot more control over it. So that's the part we like, is the control piece. But in terms of the satisfaction value of it, the valence of it, not as satisfying. And so what you're doing is you're converting things into something that has real value, and also you're hardening the target. So it is a surplus resource management thing, where it's like, I need to make this harder for me to just give it away. I can't gamble it away if it's on my wrist. Also, there's a big feedback loop that happens when we are surrounded by survival resources. There's a part of us that feels comfort and satisfaction. There's a lot of other gain that happens wearing a cool watch. There's self-esteem, there's status that comes with that. All these are really important pieces. We tend to think of it in pop psychology, people trash all that stuff. It's like, no, we need to be able to get self-esteem out of our lifestyle. You're supposed to enjoy it. You're supposed to be able to like nice things. You're supposed to go out and buy a nice watch. The people who manufactured that watch and tailored it and crafted it, they dig the fact that you're buying it. We just have a thing about, oh my God, I'm putting it into these things that don't matter. So the big question I always ask people about when they acquire stuff is exactly what you just said. Does it hold value for you long term? When we are buying, it's actually very fascinating. When you're buying a product, you are actually buying a future expectancy of that product giving you some feeling state. We are never buying stuff. We are always buying feelings. And it's not even a present feeling state. We're always buying futures. We're buying this assumption that this watch I've got is going to make me feel good wearing it, and it's going to consistently make me feel good over time. And if it drops off quickly, then we try to replace it with another resource. But remember, we don't buy stuff, we buy feelings. We're buying a feeling state. When you buy a house, you want a place that you have a good, like, I'm going to feel great here. So when we're aware of what we're buying feeling states. We might be buying self-esteem, we might be buying status, we might be buying love and connection because people are going to be able to come and be at our house and do things with it. I'm taking people out to the track with me. All of those are important factors that are motivators. So whenever we examine motivators, the first thing we have to do is not judge motivation. Because if you start judging it, you're not going to be honest with yourself about what's really motivating you. The situation you read, the thing you read about cancer, when I've worked with people with chronic terminal illness and chronic illnesses, and when you ask them to be really honest about what are they getting out of their illness, you have to take away all the judgment on that for them to be able to say, yes, it's the only time people pay attention to me is when I'm sick. I work with addicts in recovery at recovery centers, and we have world-class recovery centers, and people are coming in. The first question I ask them is, what does your addiction do for you? Because your brain will never give up an addiction unless you can understand what you're getting out of it, what it's doing for you. And it is doing something for you. And usually it's a variety of different things. So go ahead. Yeah.
Before we lose you, I don't know if we're going to end here in 5 minutes, but I needed to ask you this and take advantage of the fact that I have time with you before I hire you. As someone who can openly admit that I have a very bad addiction for the last 20 years of my life, it's that I have no fingernails. And it's not that I bite them, but I pick at them all day for constant stimulation. I think I've identified it as stimulation.
Mhm.
What do I do? I've tried everything. I've tried the paint. I've tried the spiciness, but in picking at it with my own hands. Have you ever dealt with someone in a similar position as me? For my longest conscious memory, even when I was in 4th grade, I remember that I couldn't hold a girl's hand because I would pick at my nails and they look bad. But at this point, I've accepted it.
It's a tick. It's kind of, we used to call them nervous ticks, but it's actually not. It's actually, now we kind of refer to it as stimming. So clearly you have a brilliant mind. I mean, clearly. You're young, very successful. You clearly have a brilliant mind. What happens is that your mind doesn't have enough stuff to actually focus on. So a person who's neurodivergent, you are neurodivergent, just means you are not in the meeting. You are on the edges. You're on the tails. So either the hyper tail or the hypo tail. So your brain is constantly kind of moving. There's just constantly stuff going on. And this stimming gives your nervous system something to do. So one of the things that actually is helpful, which is counterintuitive for stimming, is actually meditative practices, is actually things that require focus, that pull all that focus into something. Because what's happening is you're doing a lot of discharging of this energy that builds up in you, which is great, but it's coming out in this constant, you're constantly having to discharge because there's just too much energy going on. And I love the Michael Phelps story that, his mom said, I put him into the pool because he was so ADHD, we couldn't deal with him. I mean, this was basically a disciplinary action to put Michael Phelps into a swimming pool. And then his coach looked at him and said, oh my God, this guy has amazing natural talent. Why? Because his brain was so powerful and he had to discharge it into these actions. So for you, first of all, it's not a negative thing. So you just take the stigma off it. It's not a negative thing. It's stimming. And so part of what would help you is to look at other things that you can do that are regulating, because it's a way that your brain is actually trying to regulate your nervous system. So the first step is interoception. Where am I? Am I calm? Am I not calm? Am I agitated? Am I not agitated? As a child, you probably didn't realize that you were anxious or agitated. And so you were doing it, but you didn't really realize it was a way your brain was trying to discharge stuff. So a lot of times we just have to find new ways to, other alternatives to it. And the behavior will start to subside as you start replacing it. So we call it, replacement by successive approximation. You find other things that your brain can focus on that discharges. So the first thing is become very aware of when you're doing it and just notice, what's it feel like? And when I'm doing, what does it feel like? And just pay a lot of attention to it, because it's unconscious right now. So the first thing is to make it conscious. Pay a lot of attention to just notice it, be really mindful. What am I doing? What's it feel like? What am I doing it? And then when you start doing that, you'll start to discover, is it calming? Is it relaxing? Oh, wow, this actually is sort of relaxing to me to do this. And then you can say, okay, what can I begin to substitute? What's the successive substitution I can do that will help me with this? What you'll find too is that there are other things that are going on in the background where you're probably activated, highly activated, and you're not aware of it. And so as you start having mental mastery over those things, you will be more focused and precise in anything you do. Because right now there's just a lot of raw, we used to call it libido energy, I'm a Jungian, libido energy that's just being directed in all these different areas. As you start really paying more attention to it, you become more precise. But the most important thing is to recognize you have a brilliant mind and a lot of activity going on. There's a lot of firing going on in there, and it's coming out in this visceral way. So first step is focus, paying mindful attention. What am I doing? What's going on? What's it mean? Not judging, just what's it mean? Releasing the negative judgment that you had as a kid on it because you were a kid and you were just you're stimming and doing the best you could. As you start replacing it with some other visceral thing that soothes your body, then it will start to subside. You actually start noticing, oh, I'm doing it, but I don't do it as long. Like, oh, I'm doing it for 5 minutes. I'm doing it for a couple of minutes. Do you know what I mean? The more attention you
Makes a lot of sense.
Play to it. But the very first step is don't judge it, because if you judge it, it goes underground. Anytime we judge a habit, our unconscious makes it more unconscious, because we don't want to shame that's why addiction is so hard. When people come in, it's like, we don't want to shame ourselves. So when we start looking at addictive behavior, I'm like, take the stigma off of it. We're just looking at what is the behavior accomplishing for you, and how do we replace that with something else?
Very good. Thank you.
What does the meditation do? Is that different than journaling, or do you think that's similar benefits? Or
well, journaling, mindfulness exercises like journaling are great because they give it's a directed focus, so you're able to direct your attention and directed focus, and you're basically kind of just writing a bunch of stuff down is a way of getting it out of your brain and into, because you have to process it from right brain to left brain in order to write it down. So it's a way of neural integration. It's a way of sort of right-left brain integration. You have to use the language centers to create language. So it helps to integrate the brain. Meditation is different. Meditation is where you are able to have some facility over different wave states in your brain. So meditation is like being able to move from an alpha state to a theta state. It's being able to change your brainwave pattern. So mindfulness is the first step in that, just going for a mindful walk, being outside, to see about regulating your body and your brain and changing brainwave states. But what happens with meditation is you actually become good at shifting from one brainwave state that's usually arousal state like beta to a brainwave state that's more connected to like sleep or processing, but you're still awake.
Because one of the big issues I have is, I think the reason I party or I do, certain things is the addiction stuff or whatever. It's like, I'm kind of like trying to escape my life, escape my brain. Like Ricky, like my brain's like firing at all cylinders all day, every day. And like I just want my brain to turn off. And that's why I seek bad habits sometimes.
Yeah. And we've talked about that. You're actually trying to shut down the brain externally through these external things and trying to anesthetize your brain, when really you have the capacity to refocus and calm your brain. But it's just these other things are easier. I mean, they're very quick. I mean, when you put a substance into your brain, because substances are intoxicants, they are toxic to our brain, and they toxify our brain in a very specific order. And so because of that, it's really easy to say, oh, if I don't want to feel this feeling, I'm just going to numb it with carbohydrates. That's mine. I'm just going to numb it with food. I did that since I was a little kid. You feel bad, here's a cookie. You feel good, here's a cookie. So my brain's like, cookie. So the thing that is important is that when you start having real mental mastery, you can actually calm your brain in the moment and shift the focus on something you want to focus to. The big fallacy people have about mental mastery, and when I worked with athletes, the first thing they said was, do not take away my edge. Do not make me into this, calm monk kind of person. I want to be able to perform. It's a fallacy that if you have mental mastery, you can no longer perform. We're just used to using our animal brain to perform. That's why I love the martial arts. And because when you work with the martial arts, it's about being able to perform with a clear mind, not from your primitive mind. You're actually using a very clear prefrontal cortex mind to perform the action. Meditation and any mindfulness practice helps you have better mental control and better resilience in challenging situations. Because when you're in a situation like the market is really volatile and you don't know exactly what to do next and you don't have enough indicators to make a choice, you're going by gut instinct. And gut instinct can either be fear-based, which is the negative deflect, and which is what you were describing earlier, Ricky, where people are just going down the fear rabbit hole or it can be intuition-based. And intuition-based is when I need to look at all these indicators in a non-linear way and see where I feel. You must do this amazingly well, Ricky, in the market, because a lot of market decisions are not linear at all.
Correct. I say wealth is not linear either. A lot of people think it's just like a slow, but it's certain inflection events that actually create wealth.
Yeah. I don't know if you know the Elliott curve. Do you know the Elliott wave?
Yeah.
So the Elliott wave, I mean, it looks like an EKG.
Yeah.
It's like this patient is really quite sick when you look at it that way. Yeah. And it's like it's amazing because we tend to, but it's fractal, we tend to think we want things to be squares and they're not. The universe and the energy of the universe is all fractal. So because of that, we have to learn to not rely on indicators we can see. We have to be able to put things together. And when you're in a slightly meditative state, you actually make those nonlinear connections much better. And people will do that automatically. It's not like you have to be a Zen master to make it in the market. But when you ask people their strategy, when they really get honest with you, it's like, well, it's kind of gut instinct, and I've learned to follow this path, and I've followed this little thing, and I pulled on this thread. and they're using a lot of intuition. They're just calling it gut instinct, but they're
Yeah.
using a lot of non-linear processing to make things happen. And they're remembering. I like the what was that movie about the pill? What was that one?
Limitless.
Limitless. Yeah.
Yeah, Limitless. I love that idea of, can you imagine if your brain actually had the facility to pull something you saw in a moment and pull that out? When Bradley Cooper is in the hallway with a girl and he's just pulling out all these references of things that he saw. Our brain is actually designed to do that. We're just not facile with it. We haven't trained our brain to pull all those little pieces together. And
Are you familiar with the Gateway Project and remote viewing and all of that jazz?
a little bit, yeah. I'd love to know more actually about it, because I think it's. I'm a Jungian, so as a Jungian, all of this stuff is amazing to me. Because
Yeah, I was extremely fascinated with what that entire study of many years was able to accomplish through essentially intuition
Yeah.
and something out of the five senses of humans.
Right.
And the best way they described it was when hunters were able to tell that there was a threat nearby without seeing it or hearing it. It was a feeling.
Yeah.
And that was the sixth sense, was the survivability, being able to know when they were in danger or in a threat.
Yeah.
And there was a study in that where they took participants, put blindfolds on them and headsets, and they put them into a meditative trance, and they would interrupt the meditation with a very loud, aggressive bang and a light flash in the blindfold, and the person's vitals would flash milliseconds before the random sound and light. And they were unable to explain this, that in theory the person knew it was coming before it occurred. And that was that blew my mind.
Because our the intuition is not limited by space and time. It's a non-linear, non-time bound quality. It's that spooky action over distance. It's the entanglement, and it's not time. It's not time based. We're used to living in a time based world, and so we tend to kind of operate on that. But there's so many things that are outside of that. The other thing that happens too is that emotions are contagious. So you walk into a room, it's not just the pheromones. People say, oh, well, it's just the leftover pheromones, and so your body picks it up. It can be that. There's a visceralness to it, but also emotional states. And a lot of times kids learn this as little kids. You walk into the room, you can tell what's going on, where if mom's upset or dad's upset or everybody's having a bad day. You feel it. And we see this in large scale events like at World Cup, where everybody starts fighting with each other. Emotions are contagious. We are animals. We're just not used to, because our brain has evolved so much, we're not used to using those as dominant techniques. But that's why I love the martial arts and I love meditative and contemplative practices from all religions, is because it's designed to keep our brain active in that way. And there's huge survival benefit to it. And of course, we think what happened is that the ones who used that in the primitive world and survived passed that trait along genetically to their children. So by virtue of us being here, most of us have that capacity. And we're losing it.
Yeah.
Seem to be losing a lot lately. Seems like the world.
Yeah.
I think that comes in hand with luxuries and comfort in life.
Yeah, you mentioned atrophy, like with AI, like we're not gonna have anything to do. So then, what's gonna happen to human beings? Like, I don't know. It's strange to me.
And there's growth and there's entropy. These are natural states, and entropy is a natural state. I mean, the longevity stuff that I'm looking at is really interesting. Like the adversity mimetics, the things that mimic adversity, are designed to overcome entropy, because there's a sort of natural entropy in the cells. And basically, there's a mechanism at the cellular level that says, if we're not needed anymore, we're out of here. We're done. So part of aging is the idea that we're not needed. So as long as we're needed, the brain keeps thinking, okay, well, we need these things. We're going to keep doing it. So hot heat, sauna, cold plunges, those things are just, in the broadest way, are forcing our body to kind of react and creating blood flow, because we live in an air-controlled environment. I mean, if you think about this century, the changes that have happened in this century, the level of stimulation that the brain is is hit with every single day, headphones and TVs and computers like we're doing, it's amazing, but it's hard for these old dog brains. It's hard for the old brains to catch up.
Yeah.
And that's why AI can create these sort of non-linear connections. But remember, AI hallucinates. I know you guys have heard this term before.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So AI, because it's a predictive language model, so it creates predictions, much the way that a lot of our senses create predictions about the environment. So it just keeps moving in level of prediction, not necessarily level of fact.
Well, I really appreciate having you on today, doctor. We're gonna post your socials if that's okay, so people can maybe reach out to you if that's all right.
Sure, great. Yeah.
And you've had an amazing positive influence on my life, and I want to say thank you, and look forward to continuing our relationship.
Great.
I-
And
I-
will there be a transcript of this?
Yeah, this will all be actually
yeah.
recorded.
Oh, it's
So-
great. Yeah, because I would love to go back to the piece you read, Ricky. I thought it was great. That's incredible.
Yeah,
So the
that's
Market
a
Wizards book.
really good book. It's
Yeah.
called Market Wizards. I'll send you a.
Yeah.
It's actually one of the reasons I'm a significantly better trader, because I find myself in spots where I'm like, wow, maybe this isn't for me, and then I read about some of the best guys in the industry who have been in that same spot,
Yeah.
and I get to reflect, like, everyone's human, everyone makes mistakes, and you have to just overcome those situations.
Yeah, and just really value your brain. I mean, this is the part that's really amazing for you. Really value the attributes of your brain, because the more you value it, the more you'll explore, and the more you'll explore and be curious about your brain, the more your capacity will improve. Not just in this area, but in all areas of your life. Intuition, your ability to self-heal, all of that is in our brain. Our brain has
Yeah.
incredible capacity for all of that.
Yeah.
We're not used to using it.
Yeah.
But I
Very
still
good.
want your Christmas list.
I definitely want to get connected with you after this as well,
Okay,
and
sure.
further explore conversation.
Yeah,
But
it's
it's been
so great to meet you.
very interesting, and I'm glad I made it.
Yeah, send me that book too, Ricky. I want it.
Yeah, I will.
All right, guys, appreciate it.
Thank
Thank you,
you guys
Eric.
so
Till
much.
next time, thanks for looking at it.